Welcome to part 6. So far, in this Recommission and Ride project, we've taken this bike apart to assess for wear and damage. We've also cleaned up the engine and a lot of the parts, refurbished the cylinder head and overhauled the disc brakes. By the end of today, the bike will be a rolling chassis again, and we'll start work on cleaning up the pistons and checking the bores. And just for something different, halfway through the video, we're going to be starting up a really special bike we've got in the workshop, so you can hear how it sounds. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started.
Been busy since we last saw the bike. We've now put on the new indicators. It's also got a new switch that's got to be wired up because the kill switch and the front brake light switch wasn't working. So that's a new switch. Change connections inside. Put the fork leg back together, put new seals in there. We've got the other one to show you in a moment. We've put the oil cooler back in. We just tidied the frame up, a little bit of paint on that. Back of the bike, we've installed the caliper, the master cylinder, filled the reservoir with oil, it's been bled, we've got a brake now, speedo cable back in place. Also the oil tank's gone back in with new rubber mounts. After today, it will be a rolling chassis. So yeah, it will look more like it should do again. Right, front fork stanchion. As you remember, this was very badly marked. Had a lot of gouges out of it. Also, there's a lot of movement in the fork leg. So this was sent off to a company and they've actually stripped it, re-hard chromed it, and they ground it to size. That now is where it should be. We haven't got the movement, so when we put the seals in, we won't have an issue. Before, because it's so badly worn, oil's come up past the seal lip and coming out, and there's all these marks and very badly damaged, and that movement was quite excessive. So we're going to build the fork up now, very quickly put the oil in and reinstate it into the top yoke. On the bench you can see all the components, that's got to be reassembled. We have a few new seals, fork seal, this seal here is part of the damper seal. That is inserted into the fork leg, then after that's inserted, the fork spring goes in, and that really is it really. And the top end we have the cap. We assemble it all before we put it back into the fork and fill it with oil, and that should be done. Always give yourself plenty of time, and really if you haven't done it before, keep your manual in front of you and follow your step-by-step approach to doing it. The main thing is to lube the components like the oil seal. Lube that seal up first and make sure you've got a drift that's going to put the seal in. And just carefully tap it down, make sure it's square when it goes in, it's not lopsided. If it's lopsided, whip it out, start again. And when you have got your seal in, lube the seal up, obviously, and the bore of the fork leg. So when you go to put the fork stanchion back in, you obviously put additional lube on the fork leg as well, fork stanchion. All forks are different, but they are very, very similar, really. There's not a great deal of difference, but it's easier at the end, once you've got it together, don't put your spring in, put your quantity of oil in, and just compress and pull it back out, and you're making that damper work, so you're getting the air out. Try and get that working a little bit first, then put your spring in. The things that can go wrong when you overhaul a fork leg is taking seal out, gouging the seal and marking your stanchion. Be very, very careful. And a good way to get your seal out is when that's in place, you get a big open-end spanner and you carefully get underneath it and just pry it up and then move it 180 degrees and do that again. And if you do that a few places, you will lift the seal up. Also, when you come to put the cap back on, you want to make sure the threads, you don't cross thread it. Make sure it's even before you start screwing it down. So I've inserted the fork leg, but both are back in now, and we've only clamped off the top yoke. We left the bottom loose. The idea is we're going to check the headrace bearings. We're just slacking off the clamp bolt and the adjuster on the bearings. We're just going to take this off a little bit because there's a little bit notchy on the bearings, and I'll reset that to where it's nice and smooth. We'll do the proper test when we've got the wheel back in, but it just feels a little bit out at the moment because I had made a slight adjustment earlier. So we're just going to slacken off pinch bolt. Don't have to back off that far. Slacken the nut off. So what we're checking for now is we don't want the lumpiness. When you turn it from that lock to this lock, it shouldn't feel lumpy, it should feel smooth. Now, if it's really slack, you adjust it until there's resistance. I'll just show you what I mean. We're going to put some more tension on that now. And I get to the point where it's lumpy, really lumpy. Right, that's lumpy, it's all jerky, and that won't return very easily, that'll stay there. So it's almost locked up. So what we do is we just back that off, probably a flat at a time. I mean a flat, so that's what we call a flat. So you move it that amount. So it's like 45 degrees at a time. Now that's smooth now. So the acid test would be when we put the front wheel back in. But that's a lot better, than we can check see if we've got any play. So I think for the moment we just lock this nut back up. Okay, so I've fitted new tyres and I cleaned the rims up. Well, first of all, the rims were quite bad, so we used Solvo. In this case, it was the T-cut version. Quite a lot of work, but as I showed you before, if you work, you know, got a bit of time with it, work on one side and really get it clean, then turn it over. So a lot of Solvo, a lot of finger rubbing between the spokes. The rear sprocket, that's completely serviceable. There's a little bit of wear on the sides, but the teeth aren't hooked over by any means. Nothing's loose here. The speedo drive, I greased it up inside. Now the tyres, originally I said to you I was going to put Road Riders on here. I've actually gone for Avons. I couldn't get the size I wanted. These are 4100s by 19, but this is a lovely tyre. In fact, I like these more for this bike because it resembles the TT100. It's a nice tyre, it's a big bike, so you've got big tyres on there, and I think that's going to look nice on there. The main thing we're going to do now, because when I overhauled the disc, front and back, I did, as I showed you, done it wet and dry, then I coated these with WD-40. So the first thing you need to do is take that off. Don't leave that on there because of, you know, the assembly of the brake, and if that's applied with WD-40 on there, it won't work. So right, we just dropped the front wheel back into the fork legs. Now, we've got the clamps put on, then I'm going to put the mudguard on. And what I need to do a little bit later on, once you've got the back wheel in, is get it off the bench and just make sure the headrace bearings, everything is true. Well, we'll do that at the end because I can't do it up on this bench now. We want to get the scissor jack out of the way. We don't want the forks being twisted or anything. We just want to make sure everything is parallel and the forks dive nicely. Now I can't hold the front brake on because I haven't got the master cylinder repaired yet. But we just want to make sure everything is right, everything is true. So we're looking at from the handlebars forward, everything's in line. So just that alignment, just make sure that's correct. It shouldn't be out, but we just check it all. But now we're just going to get the clamps on. Okay, so on these bottom clamps we have 4 studs. Obviously now I've got 4 nuts on here to tighten up. You want to do this even pressure. You want to keep your cap even gap both sides. Now where people go wrong sometimes is they pull up on one side a little bit too much and they try and get the other one the same, and they've over adjusted, and what happens? The thing cracks. It's more chance of these cracking because the one that was on here had been cracked for some reason. So what we're going to do is just have even pressure now, just bring those up to just nip them up, then we'll do the other side, then we'll come back and just put the right amount of pressure on. I don't torque these up, you know when it feels right, so we're just going to just make sure we keep this gap even. So I tend to do a couple of turns like that, then come back to that back one, go diagonally, and just keep looking at your gap. Now we're even distance now. The gap is the same on both sides. And that's just nipping up. That's just nipping up. And that's the same. We'll do the other side. Here you are. This is different. This is a BSA Catalina Gold Star, DB34. A little bit different, 600cc. Got to start it up so you can hear it. after we blasted this mudguard, just got round to actually doing the treatment I was going to do to it. So what we're going to do, we're going to put on a metal treatment for rusted parts. What that would do is neutralise the rust, but in this case we've taken it out. When it's in the blast cabinet, it stripped most of it back. You won't see the underside of this mudguard once it's back in place. So this is quite a light colour, but this will give it a protection, it'll seal it, and you won't have to worry anymore about it. Okay, we're putting in the centre bolts on the mudguard stay. Always use a little bit of copper slip. Anything that's subject to weather conditions, corrosion, it's worth putting it on, because if you have to undo this again, it will come undone. You're not gonna. Also, when you put steel into aluminium, you won't get the oxidisation build up. So it's always a good thing. Leaving a long time between doing jobs, taking this apart to reassembly. Now, because I don't do the more modern trans that often, the caliper, I've got to put the caliper back onto the fork leg, then lower the wheel back into place into the caliper. I can't put the caliper on afterwards because it's on 2 studs on the fork leg. So I've got to release the wheel back out of the fork leg and reinstall the caliper first. So it's a simple mistake to make, and you know, we all do it, and I've just done it. One thing you need with British bikes is a lot of patience and steady hands, because they aren't built very easy to work on sometimes. They're fiddly. It's no good losing your temper. You just have to walk away from things if you get a bit hot-headed with it, because they are fiddly. It's just that, keep calm and you will get there. But you need good fingers. We check a chain for stretch. So you get hold of your chain, you push it together, pull it apart. And if there's movement on the drive links, excessive amount of wear, then you have to worry. We do this randomly around the chain. Just grab hold of it. This chain hasn't done a lot. It's in good order. And the other thing you do, check for side movement like this. You get the chain and see what sort of arc it's got when you hold it up. So you can see there is very little wear in that chain. It's in good order. Okay, so I've lifted up the chain guard and I'm going to feed the chain over the swing arm and onto the engine sprocket. And I can then get it over the back and pull the chain down. You won't be able to see me do this very easily. You push it onto the sprocket and push it on with a screwdriver. You want to do this before you put the back wheel in. And if ever you change a chain on your bike, you can always attach a new chain to your old chain and feed it on, so you haven't got this performance. Okay, we're just going to leave the spindle slack while we get the chain round and sprocket. Joining link time. So we'll put the main link in, the joiner, the plate now is on. Now the clip, the horseshoe, closed end, always faces direction of rotation. So we just put that on there, that's okay. Sometimes you need a pair of pliers to snap it on, but that time's open. There are better ones than that. I might try and find a slightly heavier duty one. But always make sure the closed end is facing forwards. If the open end was facing forwards, it's a chance when it goes over the sprocket at the front, it could open out and flick off. Turn your back wheel to get your drive. And once that's driving, get your slack on your cable. And you should be good to go. Always be careful not to cross thread, because it's very fine. And we'll nip that up in a moment. Looking at the bracket for the chain guard, it's leaning over a little bit. We just need to tweak this back a little bit. So I'll lift it up and just bend that a little bit. So we've got the chain not rubbing on this side of the cover. Okay, so we haven't got the front brake working because we haven't got the overhaul kit yet for the master cylinder. But just to make sure that the fork's telescopic okay, it's a block of wood in the front. I'm just going to push down the forks now. Everything sounds nice. Just got to take the front wheel off the ground. We'll get the back wheel on the ground. It's safer that way. So what I'm checking for now is any movement in the forks this way, backwards and forwards. We know we've had that staunching done, so that fork is in good order, and this one was okay as well. The only thing, if there is any movement, it'd be the yoke bearings, top and bottom. Because we've already pre-adjusted it to a certain extent, it might be okay. So I'm just pulling on the fork legs. I've got no movement. Now if I turn the handlebars, there's no lumpiness, it's nice and smooth. We just need to reclamp the bottom two off. The top ones are pulled up anyway. The handlebars, we have slackened those off and we've pinched them up. But when the tank's back on, we can get them to the right position. I'm going to buff the bolts up anyway on the wire wheel and just finish those off a little bit, because any fasteners now we will take out and clean up, put back in. What we've done, because the engine's wet sumped, all the oil's gone to the bottom of the engine, to the bottom of the crankcase and filled up. So we've removed the strainer cover and the mesh, and all clean, as you can see. A lot of silicone around here, we don't use that. And we just dropped the oil out. Okay, so I need to clean up the piston crowns now. They're a little bit carboned up. I don't think it'll take too much to clean these up. I'm probably just going to soak a little bit of WD-40 on the top and see how soft this is to break down. Okay, just going to cover up these oil drain downs. It's got one each side, put a piece of cloth over there. Just going to use this pad and just see if we can soften this up. Yeah, you want to do this when your piston's at the top of its stroke, so nothing will get past that top ring. And what we're doing in a moment, we just blow it out with an airline. That's why we've got the other two pistons covered up with paper on the top. So I've just got the same material now on a piece of cloth. We're just going to work this. Also, we'll see what size, oversize or standard this piston is in a moment. So the first thing we can see, you've got the front, chain use the front. So if you're putting your pistons in the direction the piston should go in. But STD, so the standard. So it's absolutely standard. So really good engine, really. So whether this is a replacement set of barrels, which could well be, because we know it's been apart before, but they're standard pistons. And we drain the oil down, then that's really, really clean. So yeah, this should be a good engine inside, which I'm really pleased about. The reason we don't use a wire brush is obviously damage you can do to the top of the piston. You don't want to score this up, you don't need to do that. And also the fact that if the wire brush bristle breaks off, you may not see it. It might drop down between the top of the crown of the piston and the first ring. It's just recessed down there, laying flat. You won't see it there. So that's another reason. So we never use anything metallic either on the top of the piston. So that's cleaned that one up. We don't need to be perfect with it. We're going to check the bores once we've done all three pistons and just show you how clean it looks inside. Right, the checks we do really would be to get a hold of the crown of the piston and move the piston side to side. There will be movement because obviously with expansion the piston will expand and those tolerances will be taken up, but that's fine. I'm looking at these bores for signs of seizure marks, any score marks up the side of the bore. Now there are a few superficial ones in this. They're not deep. But there's a few marks there. Not enough really to worry about, I don't think, really, to be honest. It's borderline because, you know, where do you go on this? It will be a case of whipping this off. This could end up having a rebore, 3 new pistons, and to insert that third piston, the way you do it on these triples is the piston comes in, it's inserted with a con rod, and it goes down from above. It's quite a lot involved. I think we're okay. So we just drained down the last of the oil now. We won't worry about this, let it drain down so it's nice and dry for next time. Thanks for your comments. We do read them, and yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed what we're doing. Remember that we all do this for fun. You know, when, okay, you know, I'm trying to say to you, when you're out in your garage, enjoy it, because it's all about having a bike and living with a bike and maintaining it yourself. So if this helps you in what I'm doing today, gives you those little tips when you're doing your own bikes, that's brilliant, because most of what we do today or have done will refer to most bikes. So it's all about having a little bit more confidence yourself and getting out there and enjoy doing it.